ample time to reach your destination.
Well, I didn't. And as much as I've enjoyed chatting with you, I have to go.
He regretted saying so, because he would love to spend more time with her. She dropped her arms and arched her shoulders. Once again, his attention was drawn to her breasts. "This is my cab."
"It was your cab, lady, and I really do have to go."
He turned his attention to the driver and said, "I need to get to the Dayspring Baptist Church in Harlem in less than 20 minutes. The driver shook his head, reluctant to move.
"I don't know, man,"
he said with a deep Jamaican accent.
"I was called to take a lady to the airport."
Galen took out his wallet, pulled out a $100 bill, and offered it to the guy.
"I'm down to 19 minutes now."
The man almost snatched the bill out of Galen's hand and shot the woman an apologetic look.
"Sorry, miss. I have a large family to feed. I'll call in and have another cab sent for you."
Satisfied, Galen reached over to close the door, but the woman, the sinfully beautiful but very angry woman, was blocking the way. He tilted his head back and looked up at her.
"Do you mind?"
"Yes, I do mind. You have to be the rudest man I've ever met. Someone needs to teach you some manners."
He smiled. "You're probably right, but not today. Some other time, perhaps."
She glared at him as she moved out of the way, but not before saying, "And for heaven's sake, will you please zip up your pants?" He glanced down.
"Oops."
He quickly slid up his zipper before closing the door. The cab pulled away then, and he couldn't resist glancing back through the window at the woman they'd left at the curb. She was not a happy camper. In fact, she looked downright furious. And he should give a damn why. Because he had behaved like an ill-mannered brute, which was not his typical behavior, especially when it came to beautiful women. It was definitely not the impression he would want to leave with one. If he'd had the time, he would have charmed her right out of her panties and bra. It was the Steele way.
Oh well, you win some and you lose some.
And he'd much preferred losing her than his behind. And there was no doubt in his mind that Donovan would kick that very part of his anatomy all over New York if he was late for his wedding.
"I now pronounce you man and wife. Donovan, you may kiss your bride."
Donovan Steele didn't waste time pulling his wife into his arms and giving her a kiss many probably thought was rather long. And if that wasn't bad enough, when he'd finally pulled his mouth from hers, he whispered,
"I love you, sweetheart."
Natalie Ford Steele smiled up at her husband and said, "And I love you." And then she was swept up into her husband's arms and carried out of the church. Galen swallowed to keep from gagging as he watched the entire scene. Even though Natalie was a nice-looking woman, a real beauty, he'd still had a hard time believing that Donovan had decided to hang up his bachelor shoes and take a wife. Donovan's reputation as a womanizer was legendary. In fact, he'd been so infamous in Charlotte that there were some who thought he was one of Drew Steele's sons instead of a cousin. Galen figured Charlotte wouldn't be the same without a bachelor Steele to keep things lively. Maybe he ought to consider leaving Phoenix and moving east. He kicked that idea out of his mind real quick. His older Steele cousins in Charlotte would probably give him a job in their steel manufacturing company. He much preferred remaining in Phoenix doing what he loved, which some people thought was trivial. And his father topped that list of critics. Drew Steele believed that a man was supposed to get up at 7 o'clock, Monday through Friday, and work at some job until at least 5. It had taken Drew a long time to buy into the principles according to Galen Steele, which said that a man was supposed to work smarter, not harder. That was why at the age of 34, Galen was a multi-billionaire and was still building an empire, while working less than 20 hours a week and having fun at what he did. 14 years ago, while attending the University of Phoenix, pursuing a degree in engineering, he and his 2 roommates decided to do something to make money, something different than what their friends were doing, like selling their blood or their sperm. So they began creating video games. After their games became a hit on campus, they formed a business, and by the time they graduated from college 2 years later, they were millionaires. The 3 of them were still partners today. Their business, the Sid Corporation, was represented by 3 CEOs, Galen Steele, Eric Ingram, and Wesley Duvall. Their only employees were their art team. He, Eric, and Wesley shared duties as game designers and programmers,